There are those who complain that criminals rule our streets. Bah! I will show you real policing. I shall rewrite history. By hand, if need be.
Hey, this is John of ArchonDigital.com. You're watching my City Skylines series, Republica de Malate. This is episode 2, and today I'm gonna walk you through me building a Chinatown and some slums. Right now, what you're seeing is me laying down the roads, the main roads for the Chinese quarter, and I'm putting down sort of a square, a mini plaza. These Taiwanese commercial buildings work really great when you want to create something that would resemble Chinatown or an Asian city. Now, this is in stark contrast to the European build that you've seen in the previous episode, but that really is the case when you're in some cities in Asia, particularly those that have been colonized by Europeans or Americans. There's quite a diverse or a cosmopolitan mix of different types of architecture depending on the time period. In Manila, for example, you have Parisian Victorian buildings in the old Escolta district, which are quite literally run down, and sad to say, not in their best condition at the moment. But if you would see them in their heyday, it would have been great. I wish they weren't, neglected as much after World War II. But then there's also a period of time during the American occupation in Manila where people were crazy about Art Deco, and there were a lot of Art Deco structures there, also heritage sites, a lot getting torn down, which is a disaster for conservationists and heritage people, and so this is a mix of all that, and also some of what I've seen while I've been traveling around Southeast Asia, particularly slum areas in the not so touristy places, or even the touristy places. I've never been to Thailand, but the housing there is pretty similar to what houses are in most parts of Asia. So most parts of Asia basically have the same look. If I walk in some a few blocks from the main urban areas of Kuala Lumpur, I feel like I'm home in the Philippines. In some cases, like I'm in some subdivision. It's a little cleaner, definitely, but it feels like home. I mean, people look the same, people sound the same. Bahasa sounds a bit like Filipino in a lot of ways, and there really isn't that much difference. I mean, if you let me live in Malaysia for a while or in Indonesia for a while, I could probably learn Bahasa in months. And even if you take me to like Singapore, I mean, it's great that there's these mix of cultures that blend in here in Southeast Asia, where you have all these influences in architecture and food, and just trying to get a representation of that a somewhat accurate, sort of accurate representation of that here, it would be perfect. And this is what I'm trying to do here, though of course this is fictional and I'm gonna do this my way, how I want it to be, or how I want it to look. For example, well, right now I just popped in this well, it looks like a mall that you typically see on a in for example in Divisoria here in Manila. It's Chinese malls, Chinese owned malls in the Chinatown district look like kind of like that, with flashy LEDs outside and the colors, you know, like 168 or 169 or whatever. It just there's loads of those malls named after numbers here in Manila, and I just can't memorize all of them, but I know where they are. I can, like the green ones, 168 or something, or maybe it's not green anymore, I'm not sure. Well, anyway, I just put that in there so there'll be some sort of contrast or something to break the monotony of these Chinese buildings I'm putting in, and it does a good job of just being there, being this large mall. If I can find another one in the asset in the workshop, something similar, I'd do the same. I'd put something next to it, but for now I'll just fill this in with buildings, and we'll work from there. Now I've been contemplating if I'm gonna fill that part up with buildings or just lay down some like parking lots or a park or some open space. I want to have a sort of transition from the commercial areas to my residential, which is gonna go behind this mall. And so I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with this open space. I might decide to turn this into a parking lot, or maybe a park, or maybe some open, you know, like food stalls or an open market or something, typical of what you'd see in Chinatowns. I'm getting tired of saying the name. So there you have. I'm trying to position it in a way that it's just gonna work with these narrow streets and narrow alleyways, which I intend to use for the interior of this district, because I find the roads too wide, more really westernized in design rather than what you would see in third world countries or in other developing countries. And if you go around even Chinatown here in Manila, it's not that Chinese really if you look at it closely. I mean, this me depicting my Chinatown here as full of Chinese signs. That's not really the case. Maybe there's a few blocks here where there are Chinese signs everywhere. There are Chinese newspapers and all. There's a welcome art. Well, a bit of trivia here that Manila has I'm not sure if it's true, but everybody says it, so I guess it is. Has the oldest Chinatown in the world, and there's supposed to be literature supporting this claim, so I guess I can say it's fact, but correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody says it is. So even when they're celebrating here during Chinese New Year, they always say Binondo is the oldest Chinatown in the world. And there's a lot of Chinese heritage, so a lot of the Malay Chinese mix here in the Philippines, that's all blended in with the Spanish and the American, and it really is a mix of everything, and it's pretty hard to, in this case, to like find some sort of your national identity of what your culture really is, because you come from these different backgrounds. I mean, I grew up watching too much Western television, American television, and then that was the era I was born in. I mean, the TV programming. There's local TV programming, but there are a lot more American shows back then. Well, there are still a lot now, but I mean, growing up, I literally learned how to speak and read from Sesame Street, and then Electric Company, and then all those other kids shows, PBS shows when I was a kid. And surprisingly, even from my American friends, those shows they never thought was a normal thing here, but they were. I mean, we had a lot of Western influences, but now there's this huge mix of international shows. You have a lot of Korean movies, you have a lot of Japanese, other Asian country movies, and you have Netflix with all these different shows from different cultures, and you're not limited to just who your former colonizers were. And I guess it's a good thing, because the kids these days, I mean, my kids, they don't even watch TV. We just stopped watching TV like maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Well, at least for me, it was 10 years ago. I just didn't have the interest in watching television. I'd watch TV shows. I mean, I have Netflix. I had Hulu at some point, and I even tried iFlix just for Mr. Robot. But just circle back on what I was talking about. Me, you have a mix of cultures, all hashed together, and living together here, and it's, in a way, it's also what's spoiling everything, but it's also an opportunity to be more dominant in the international scene. I mean, if we get our act together here, the best model I've seen, the best solution I've seen is what the Singaporeans have done. I mean, they sorted out their multiracial, multicultural thing early on in the early parts of when their country was really young, and then they really sorted that out, and so that pretty much helped them establish an identity. Now, right now here, there's a lot of regionalism here when you're in the Philippines, and if you're from the south, if you're from the north. I mean, it's just mostly people like throwing shade at each other, light banter because of the accents, because of someone's complexion, because of how someone talks, and believe me, I've experienced all of that growing up, because I moved from one part of the country to another when I was growing up, and in my teens I was a stranger in up north, and I didn't speak the language. I was too tall for everyone. I was too white for everyone, and it's just one of those things you have to deal with growing up when you're in some place where there's a lot of different cultures. Now here I am laying down the first of these concrete buildings, which I really love because it reminds me, well, it's a really good representation of third world country buildings that people's priorities in life are different. I mean, build a shelter and that's it, and make it a good, really particularly structurally sound shelter. Doesn't have to be pretty. That's more utilitarian and in nature, and that's really is the case in a lot of these neighborhoods where people would have families working abroad or families with decent jobs, and the first thing they do is get a decent structure, a decent roof to give them shade, shelter, and then as someone progresses in life, that's when they start being creative and start thinking of the design. But you have a lot of this. If you fly a drone in the most densest parts of Metro Manila, you'd see something like this: a mix of concrete and wooden and GI sheets, along with informal settlers blended in together. In one part of the city, there's this posh neighborhood or a posh condominium, and then all of a sudden, like a concrete wall away are these shanties, and that's real life here. It's not fiction. And that's something that I want to depict here in the series that I'm building. That there's these structures that are really contrast against each other, like these shanties here. I mean, you'd see a lot of these here, and not all of these are poor people. I mean, some of them just are working class and have decent work: teachers, firemen, policemen, professionals. But some of them are stuck in these types of housing, and whether it's a social issue or just how we are as a culture is besides the point. I mean, there's this factor that we have a lot of extended family, which is typical of Asians, not just in the Philippines, but it's a factor here that there's a lot of housing that's overcrowded, or just what I would normally call as the lack of personal space. And there was a time in my life where I had to live in one of those shacks, and I'm not ashamed to say that I did at some point. Had to stay in a house that was concrete, by the way, but was surrounded by shacks all around, and it was home for me for like few years until I moved into an apartment which we owned as a family, and that's just one of the points I'm trying to make. I mean, you don't have to be poor to live there, and not everybody who lives there is poor, and a lot of the people are poor by Western standards, by international standards, and a lot simply just grew up there and work and live with their families and probably save a lot because they don't have to pay rent or something, and the moment they have enough money, they move out, they move somewhere outside the city or get a condominium, or that's normally how life is here. So now here I'm putting in a mix of these buildings, and this is me being lazy, zoning a few areas because I wanted to just get some commercial spaces up, and just add in a few warehouses, a few factories, which I want to blend in with the area. Like, this is a car factory near the port, and presumably a lot of the people who would be living in the shacks would be working in the factory and in the warehouses nearby. And the I'm laying out some bus lines here, but this is just temporary, so I just get some people moving in. If you notice, I actually speed up the time frame because I want to see how people move around the city. In fact, I've built like 3 different areas around the city already. There's the beachfront and parts of the old town, and this where I have, just so I can simulate people moving around different areas. So as I build Chinatown, I have a few other areas away from this that already have some population, and which I would cover in later episodes. But for now, I want to concentrate on this. So I want to add a few industrial buildings along with these houses here, and lay down some services, because I keep forgetting to put in fire buildings, fire stations and police stations. And there's the local fire department, and there, I almost forgot I made pink buses for this Chinatown. I just found it cute. And so I'm laying down a few more of these concrete and steel GI sheet housing, and then I'll put more detail and texture at some point. But right now I just want to lay out a very rough, sort of unplanned neighborhood where streets just grew out of nowhere, which is typical in a lot of cases where some neighborhoods just spring up without some sort of master plan, or if there were, it was all part of like a master plan 100 years ago, and now it's all overpopulated. And that's how I see these neighborhoods. Well, if you see me adding that's the cube asset, which helps me simulate the overpopulation of these densely populated areas. I mean, it's fairly normal to see areas with 10,000 people in crammed all in shanties and low quality housing that you would see in these slum areas. And so I want to simulate that by adding those cube Rico asset, that cube Rico asset. By adding that, I instantly get like potential of like 5 to 10,000 people in an area, so they're densely packed in one spot, and so I get to simulate traffic, the foot traffic there. That's why you see a lot of people walking around, because this is a crowded part of the city. And there you go, we have our first fire, which is weird because there are choppers responding to the fire, because you don't normally see that here in real life. But anyway, so here I'm adding a few more warehouses and really trying to figure out how to lay down the roads for this neighborhood so that it won't be too much of a grid, but more of like organically, I mean, roads that basically naturally evolve or grow out of a place. I mean, these areas are not supposed to be well thought out, well planned. maybe planned in some way and then built on top of each other over the years. That's why I wanted the road layout to be irregular. But then I would also throw in some other large, like a large structure like this. It could be a factory or anything, and maybe fill shanties at the back of it or something, or just maybe these warehouses. So I want this semi-industrial area to be built around the back, basically what's the not so commercial parts of the Chinatown, and work my way from there. Let's and see if I can add more buildings. And right now I'm thinking of adding something here, like offices too as well. So if you see, it's getting pretty densely packed now, and in the next episode I'll fill in the other half here near the roundabout, that smaller roundabout there to your left. I'll fill that area with slums and other commercial buildings, probably a mall. Right now I'm still figuring out where I'm gonna put the welcome art, the usual welcome art for Chinatowns, and then I have a candidate here at some part of the Chinatown. And there's quite a lot of roads that they have to connect to each other, so people would have access to the slums from different parts, from different main arteries, because that's usually how people get around. There's alleyways, or how you would call them here is esquinitas, or back alleys, where people would traverse to get from one part of the city to the other. They're typically crowded and typically sometimes dirty, or just filled with bums or street life. And by the way, if you've seen me lay out some drainage assets, is because I'm using rainfall. I'm using rainfall mod, which for a while it feels like an entire DLC to me. I mean, I love using rainfall. It's a mod on the workshop, and it simulates rain and floods. There's another mod I like, which is tides, but I'm not using it now. And basically with rainfall, you can simulate rain and the drainage, and how the rainwater would drain out of your city, and I really love using that. So that's why you don't see me laying out pipes along the roads, because it screws up when I have to lay down drainage, and plus I'm a little lazy, and I prefer not to lay out my water line in a grid form around the city. I just want to connect them however I want. And so here I'm adding in more housing over here. Well, I haven't decided how to connect this, but in the next episode I intend to fill that area with housing, and these buildings should be a mix of commercial and of light commercial and residential, because a lot of the housing areas here in Manila, for example, is a mix of semi-commercial areas, where people live on the second floor and have shops on the ground floor, and normally people would just walk to the store or a small market nearby, near where they live. And so I'm trying to simulate that here. So people might say I'm being too, or how do you say that? Being too tactless about how I talk about the urban conditions in Manila, or putting my city in a bad light. But no, from my perspective, this is fictional, dude. I mean, chill out. I mean, I'm talking about a fictional city here with references from where I live, where I actually live. So it's not me playing, you know, a rich guy playing I want to build a poor neighborhood thing. No, I actually stayed for a few years in one of those shacks. I married into my wife's family, which used to live in one of those shacks. It's not something I'm ashamed of. I mean, it's real life. So don't come around telling me I'm just like to play pretend here or anything. But what I'm trying to depict here is what's real to me, to my surroundings, because I've seen a lot of work done on City Skylines, and I'm really impressed with all the other creators that have published their work. But I've always wanted to do something that represents something where I actually live. Now, I've been to Paris, I've been to a few other places, I've been to a few cities in Europe, and they're all beautiful and all. And then when I look at other creators' works, and I say that, wow, they really did their job here. I mean, they really built this European themed city very accurately. I mean, it's like I was walking the streets of Paris, or I was walking the streets of a Swiss town, and it's perfect. But I've never seen work that actually depicted the urban setting here in the Philippines to this detail. I mean, I've seen a few works. I mean, I've seen that guy who built Olongapo City. That's pretty accurate to the map. I mean, that's a very accurate layout. I've been talking for the past 35 minutes now, and I think this is a better format than just talking for a few minutes and just going overdrive on time lapse, which is what I did in the previous episode, which I think sucks after watching it back a few times. And then it's really annoying, tiring to the eyes to see me pan at high speed. And with the music was great, because the music was from a friend of mine who has a SoundCloud channel. And I mean, it's I want to show as much as I can, but learning from my previous mistakes or work, or mistakes, I'll just say mistakes. I mean, it's better to just, if I concentrate on the story that I'm trying to tell. So I took all these Chinatown parts, put them together from my recording, and cut up scenes. You're looking at 90 minutes of footage, or actually you're looking at 4 hours of footage sped up 200-300%, and then cut up, because anything that I see that doesn't add to the story, I just cut it up, so I'd have more time, or I'd get to prioritize the story over anything else. And I'm just showing an overview of the entire Chinese district, which covers that area, which I'm putting under the shade. And then the next episode I'll cover filling up those areas. So far so good. I'm gonna throw in a few cinematics after this and we'll wrap this up. So if you like this video, please press a thumbs up, like and subscribe. Press that notification bell icon so you'd get notified if I post another episode. And I guess that's it. Thank you for watching. Catch you later.